We're going to jump into item D, 20132-25, presentation on council strategic goal, economic vitality, and quarterly economic development update. And Mr. Isaacson, you're going to kick us off?
Thank you, Chair Cole. Yes, I will be emceeing this evening's presentation, but I will be inviting up a number of my colleagues throughout the presentation to speak to specific items and issues. So, as you know, you will be receiving several updates this year on the council's strategic goals. In May, Ms. Madison presented on quality of life. This evening, we'll be talking about economic vitality. Next slide, please. Economic vitality encompasses a number of things, but it really addresses the community's ability to grow, diversify, develop, and sustain the many elements necessary for our local economy to flourish. Next slide, please. So I won't go through all of these, but I think this slide shows the sort of diversity of topics encompassed in economic development, ranging from housing to business development, downtown revitalization, as well as promoting cultural and arts events and capital projects like broadband expansion and things like that. So because it sort of spans such a diverse set of departments and programs, as I said earlier, I'll be inviting up a number of folks to talk to specific issues, the first of which is housing. And so I'd like to invite up Dan Osborne, our Housing and Special Projects Manager.
Good evening again. I don't know how I keep ending up on the top of all these lists. But I do want to walk you through sort of the housing and special projects, some of the things that we're working on, and then hopefully how these are all contributing then to economic vitality. One of the things that we started out was to increase the organizational capacity, and that really kicked off with getting the affordable housing plan done last year and identifying different partners and different groups that we could be working with. And then kind of following up on that was getting the new service contract in place with the Santa Fe Community Housing Trust to replace the housing partnership, which had previously provided us with the rehabilitation loans as well as the home buyer down payment assistant loans. The plan is adopted, we're using it, and Santa Fe is on board. We just finished our first home rehab loan. Just closed on that. We'll be getting that project moving forward. We've got a handful more of those in the pipeline right now. Another program that we haven't had a chance to talk about, but I'm happy to sort of be able to bring before you tonight, is working with Housing New Mexico, which is formerly MFA, New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, and their weatherization program. We've been doing a little outreach with them. They essentially fund a grant program for folks making up to 200% of the poverty level. So that's about $31,000 here in Los Alamos. And then they contract out with Central New Mexico Housing Corporation to provide those services that include things like sealing doors and windows, adding insulation into the attic and walls, repairing and replacing furnaces, hot water heaters, things like that. And so we'll be rolling that out in the next couple of weeks. You'll see, even though it's not a program that we will be administering, they will administer it on our behalf, and we'll work with them to do some marketing, get materials out, and see if we can't get an applicant pipeline going for them. And then the other big thing that we've been working on is the preservation and increasing the housing stock. We're still working on the increasing housing stock part, but we have made some progress in the preservation, and that's with the 87 deed restrictions on the 9th Street apartments. That project closes on the 30th. So just a couple, 10 days, whatever we are out from that. So we're getting really close to that. And then we'll get that program, get that moving forward as well. Next slide, please. And actually, perhaps, were there any questions on that slide? Okay. And so trying to facilitate, one of the other big parts of the program is trying to have the facilitated conversations in the community. A lot of work has been done on North Mesa. We've gone out, done, sort of before I got here, had done all the design charrettes and work with the community to see what sort of housing and neighborhood they'd like to see developed on that site. We got a lot of feedback on that was instructive for us then to start looking at sort of that transportation and infrastructure study that we needed to do to make sure that we could deliver sort of that community, what the community imagines on that property. As I alluded to earlier, we just got the draft study back. We will be diving into that as staff. We'll route that into the different departments to get their feedback and kind of truth that up, and then get that last little bit done with the sewer inspections and get that, make a report back to council at some point on sort of what we found, and have a chance to also get back in front of the school board and engage with them a little bit more about the scope and range of a project that we might be able to get off the ground sort of short term, or if we want to have a long-term look, but that'll be sort of the next step in that community conversation. And then certainly the budget guidance that we got a couple of weeks back, or about a month ago back, to dedicate 1/4 cent GRT to the housing fund. Very appreciated, and goes a long way to helping create that funding source that we need, not only to do projects, but to leverage that money to help fund projects or to get grant money or other loans that might be available to do a lot of the important work that we're trying to get done. So we're very excited about that. In the last two on this, the regional coordination, we really are working hard to get off the hill and have conversations with our neighbors in the area. And specifically, we've met with Buffalo Thunder, with Poake, Sanai. Shanna has been really, really helpful to me to get a lot of those conversations started as she's talking about other economic development opportunities. They do seem to always be coming back to housing. And where it's really created some synergy and borne fruit for us is around some potential conversations with LIHTC projects where they may have land and we have some capital, both human capital and money, that we might be able to contribute to some of those. There are a lot of politics off the hill that we also have to navigate. So those are high-level discussions at this point. Although I know we have, or although I can say that we have identified a handful of sites around the Espanola and, in Espanola and sort of the valley down there where we might be able to have some further conversations, including with Santa Clara on some of the tribal-owned lands there and the Santa Clara Economic Development Corporation. That would include some conversations around RV parks, whether it would be something up here on the hill or something that we might be able to contribute to off the hill. They already own and manage a number of those sites and have the capacity not only to manage them, but they also, Santa Clara specifically, they actually have their own development corporation, and along with that, their own construction corporation. So they've got a couple of different entities under the Santa Clara Pueblo or the Santa Clara Economic Development Corporation that then knock down some of those projects. So we've had some conversations with them. Hey, one of the big things that we have problems with are local workforce. In fact, I believe they built this building. As I recall, we contracted with them to do the construction of this building using their, I have lost the name of it. It's not the Santa Clara Construction Corporation. It has a different name, but they actually did the contracting on this building. And so we continue to have some of those conversations with them. And then quickly, I'll just kind of go through the housing pipeline. As you all know, as we talk about housing, we sort of have the real affordable housing, that 30 to 60% AMI. It's the hardest sort of affordable housing to be able to accommodate in the community. It takes lots of different partners and lots of layers of financing to get those projects done. But we have had some success. We've got 134 units between Canyon Walk and the Bluffs. And as some of you know, we've had some ongoing conversations with them around management and tenant relations and those things. And we've had some really constructive and meaningful conversations with them that have led to some change. I can report back that they are changing some of their practices with their leases and with some of the other documentation that they have and the way that they interact with their tenants in there to make sure that it is clear what types of inspections they're doing, when they're doing inspections, and for what purpose they're doing those inspections. So we hope to continue to move that ball forward and continue to work with them, because I do see them, or we do see them as sort of, they're our lifelong partner. We're in this together, and we want to make sure that they're providing the service and the housing that we thought we were getting when we transferred that land to them. And we also know that should we be able to find additional land for another LIHTC development, we believe we have the absorption to do that. We have developers who would be interested in coming here if we had a piece of land that we could put out for solicitation. So that would be another chunk that we could really move the needle on, that 30 to 60% AMI. Some of those folks are really hard to be able to find adequate and appropriate housing for. Other things that are in the process, we have Sherwood Rounds. They're in our entitlements process, making a lot of progress. That's here in White Rock, and is part of the Longview realignment and some of the participation in the county on that. Although that's not an affordable project, there could be opportunities to have additional conversations with them as they sort of move forward on that. The 44 units at North Community, kind of Conoco Hill or Arkansas Place, they have kind of stalled out a little bit. They have those units for sale. I think we've got 2 in and 3 for sale now. So 5 out of the 44 have been completed. The last time that we spoke with them, they're trying to get enough interest to get a building. They'll get that building going, and then that sort of flips into the capital to do the next building. So they're trying to take, I don't know that I want to call it a phased approach, but they are trying to sort of reassess how they can get that project moving again. But that's, again, private development, and it is really sort of, they're working on it, and we're here to support if we can. But not a big role for the county on that one. Certainly the Hills apartment, we're all waiting, have bated breath to get that one across the finish line. There has not been a lot of work on the site over the last month or so, as Pavilion, the ownership group, have been working through their contracts and some of their plan amendments and other things that they need to get resolved in order to move that forward. The good news is they are doing work. We have received many of the plan amendments that we need for our building inspections to be able to get back out on site and get them to the COs. They're hoping that will happen some point later this year. And we're excited to have them back out on the site. Mirador, that's another transfer property, formerly the A19 here in White Rock, just a little bit west of us. They continue to be moving forward on their projects. We're working with them on some of there's a lot of terraforming going on out there, and there have been some ongoing conversations about the retaining walls between the lots and some of those things that we're navigating with them to get across the finish line. But they are continuing out there. So we do have a lot that is in progress and moving forward. Many of them are former transfer properties that came to us from Lanel, and that we then were able to flip out to the development community to get housing built on. I think we've got, if you sort of total all of that up with Mirador and Canyon Walk, the Hills, the Bluffs, we've got about 400 units that are coming online, and they come on slowly, but they are coming online. Next slide, please. And then, sort of the Planning Commission approved, we have, another 600 some units that have been approved. This is where they've come through. They've gotten their entitlements, and now they've got to go figure out their financing and contractors and go out and get things built. Ponderosa Estates, they have a site plan approved. They've got some infrastructure constraints out there that they need to work through, so we'll be able to be in a position to accept the utilities. Arbolada, they have recently come back in with that. Actually, we need to update that. Just last week, they came in and went through Planning and Zoning Commission and got their sketch plan approval for 137 units, I believe. And it'll be sort of a split between single family on the west side and then 114 units of townhomes that will be more of a little townhouse project with 4 rent units. And we're excited to see that moving forward through the entitlements process over the next little bit. We have already talked about Mirador. That's all moving forward. The mixed use, we're anxious for that to get going as well, but they're finishing up phase 3 now of the original development and should be moving this way. Cañada Bonita, I really don't have any updates for you on that. We just have not heard much from that property owner, although it has been approved for 160 multifamily units with a small commercial core to it. Same thing with LA Center, or the former Merrimack, or the current Merrimack. That's just kind of moving along. They're continuing to be interested in working on their financing to get that across the finish line. Then we've got a couple of other lots throughout the community. They're going to come online, and that we believe we'll see coming in the 125 units, the 2201 Trinity Drive. That's the back half of the Century Bank. The front half of the Century Bank is coming in for a building permit now. So we're hoping that they'll get some traction, get the bank done, and then come in and do the residential that we've seen before in other iterations. And then Sherwood Rounds, we've already spoken about with the sketch plan and moving those 29 units forward. Next slide, please. And right now we're really starting to kind of work on building out the metrics and how to best sort of, we've got things that are being built. We have things that were approved and are in some stage of construction or finance or getting, kind of shovel ready. And then we have some that we just know are in the pipeline because we have, we've been talking with the developer. So we are working a little bit more on our metrics. What we have up here is just an example of what we're doing with the home renewal and the home buyer programs. We hope to be able to sort of telegraph to council and to the community how many we have, how many we've gotten approved. For every half dozen that we go through some sort of an application process actually leads to one that we are actually able to fund. So it's a little bit hard to sort of figure out which metric is important, that kind of thing. But we're going to start getting that out there. So you'll see those for both the home buyer and the home renewal programs. And then as we get A8A and 20th Street moving forward here in the next little bit, we'll start to build out another metric where it has solicitation in a time frame, development agreement in a time frame, contract construction, entitlements, those kinds of things. So we can sort of see where they're at in the larger construction and development process from ideation all the way through CO. So then we'll come up with a few different metrics for that and try to get some of that up as far as the metrics as well as we move forward, just to kind of keep council a little better informed as well as the community. And it keeps me honest in where I'm at in these processes and projects as well. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any councilor questions on housing? Councilor Hedman?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Quick question about your footnote about the ADUs a couple slides ago, or maybe right there. No applications or issued permits mean no res. So I think, as I recalled, only a certain number of lots in Los Alamos and maybe part of the acres are permitted to have ADUs on them. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that was done intentionally. But you're saying that the people who reside on those lots, no one has made application to have one.
Yeah, since we sort of updated the code a couple of years ago to sort of streamline some of those things, clarify where they would be allowed, and sort of reestablish which zone districts they would be appropriate in, we've had no ADU applications. That isn't to say that people haven't built other structures on their property or built studios or those kinds of things, but nothing that is at a level of finish that would qualify for a habitable space, kitchen, bathroom, those kinds of things.
So then that makes me wonder, and maybe it's just a conversation to be had at a different meeting maybe, but do we have a desired outcome for there to be more ADUs like there are in other communities where they've had housing crunches, and where it can help people with the affordability of their home, because it can, or help with helping elderly parents or relatives age in place and avoid nursing costs, et cetera. So I think there's a myriad of benefits, at least from my vantage point of ADUs, and maybe people don't realize it, maybe people don't know about them. If you haven't been in a community or read articles about it, you may not even know what ADU even stands for to begin with. So maybe if we want to offer more affordable housing and more housing options and better care of our seniors, et cetera, maybe we should be promoting, or at least educating or informing, maybe promotes probably for sure the wrong word, but informing people, hey, this is a thing and you could do this and here's how you do it and here's the process, and then let people decide. That's all I'm thinking about that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. That's something that we can definitely look into, and I think that would be a very low lift for us to be able to do some promotion and just maybe get something out to the community to say, hey, if you live in the zone district, did you know you have the opportunity to do an ADU? And then we could do some education around that. Myself in the planning department, I would want to lean on them a little bit because it would come through their office with the sort of the low level entitlement for the permits on that.
Great, thank you.
Council Righty?
Thanks, Chair Cole and Mr. Osborne. So the one slide, so I was just checking because it did look like it was much less. So one slide has a typo on it, unless the column was meant to add up both numbers. Because you had what was completed and what was in the pipeline. It was 383, not 547. Right? And then you have Sherwood Round showing up in two different places. Yeah, this one. You can't see I'm pointing at the screen. Yeah. In progress 517 is not that. That doesn't add up to 517, right? Unless. But anyway, I think that's something
It's
to
new
fix.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the question about ADUs. I remember having the discussion about that, and I think we also have a proximity. You can't have like people living right next to each other having ADUs. Isn't there a distance that you have to enforce about a density limit as well?
Madam Chair, Councilor Righty, there are a number of different things that we would look at if somebody were, if somebody were to come in and engage our office about an ADU on their property. We'd be looking not only at the zone district, we would be looking at building setbacks, we would be looking at the building code to ensure that there are proximity and separations between structures. Typically, it's about 10 feet unless you start doing some fire rating, different things like that. So there are a number of different internal county departments that, all within CDD generally, that would be looking at those to help somebody appropriately place an ADU on their property. So it's both the planning department and the building department that they would need to have some interaction with.
Yeah, I understand that, but I thought that when we adopted the code change to allow them, that you couldn't, for example, have a next door neighbor that had an ADU and you could have an ADU. That's my recollection, but maybe that's incorrect. So I think it's worth looking at the language that we have, and I guess since people aren't doing it, but that's one part of it. But I would like to look at that and see if that the code, the way the code's written for ADUs is appropriate. Because I just think conceptually there could be neighbors that they both, like all the conditions you outlined, they both perfectly qualify for having an ADU. But it might be the case that the way our code's written, that the second neighbor could not get one. So that's something I think to look at. Another thing I wanted to look at was parking. So I know that there's been some discussion about parking and how parking minimums add to the cost of housing. I understand we live in a fairly remote area, but I think that that's something worth looking at if we're talking about things that might help with affordability of housing. And since we're talking about workforce housing, so I think that's something that we should also look at. So maybe we can get some briefing to council about things that we have changed, but maybe want to rethink and maybe look at some other alternatives. Because my understanding is we're going to getting some development codes going to be coming back to us with some changes already. So is that something that can be integrated already into the changes you're looking at?
Thank you, Councilor Righty. Chair Cole, through you. We are in the process of amending Chapter 16. We are working right now on Articles 2 and 3, I believe, and we'll be bringing those changes forward later this fall. We will, these are sort of looking at sort of clarifications and minor adjustments, not so much substantive changes to the code. I think those changes are coming later, and that would be the time would be appropriate to look at things like minimum parking standards, ADU density requirements, things like that, to make any necessary changes to make housing both more affordable and easier to develop in the community.
Okay, appreciate that. So also appreciate the numbers. And just to comment about these are, a lot of these are land transfer, former land transfer parcels. So I was trying to think, since I've been on council for 6.5 years, I believe that the Arkansas Place might be the only development that has broken ground that is not on a land transfer parcel. Does that sound correct to anybody?
That does in fact sound correct.
Okay,
And first, let me apologize for the numbers not being correct. I do have another spreadsheet that I'm holding up that I don't know that you can see
Yeah.
that has all of the numbers and includes the land transfer parcels. And typically the projects that have been successful most recently have been on land transfer parcels.
Okay.
You know, going back to kind of 2017 timeframe.
right. And there's actually a practical difference between breaking ground and actually completing the project, or substantially completing the project. So, and I don't think we've had it. So there's been 0 projects that have been substantially completed that are on private land. And maybe this is not an economic vitality question, but I was just wondering, do we know what is stopping projects from being started or successful on private property? Because I think that I've been to other communities that have had projects completed in the last 6.5 years.
Madam Chair, Councilor Righty, I have too, and it can get done. So as we look at these, you know, I've got this sort of little spreadsheet that I sort of track for myself. And as we look at those Ponderosa Estates, for instance, 48 units that were approved up there, single family detached, market rate. There's inadequate infrastructure up there. They've got some issues where the infrastructure was not properly engineered and constructed to county development standards. And until those are brought up to county standards, and it may be as simple as, you know, get in there and video the pipe and show us the engineered drawings. And then we can have the conversation of whether or not that's something that we would bring into our system or not. And I may be oversimplifying some of this, but there are just some other issues on some of these projects that we may have an ability to help move the needle. But ultimately, we need the land ownership and the partners to sit down with us and to talk through some of those issues. Arbolada, you know, that had sort of been a private equity and getting the right deal that was acceptable to the homeowner or to the property owner. We believe that the most recent project that's going through that I alluded to earlier is viable and has a development partner that will be able to deliver on that project in a way that's acceptable to the property owners who will be selling the property. Cañada Bonita, we have heard that it just comes down to they didn't price it right. And other than that, we really don't know, just that what they got entitled, the 160 units and the commercial core, they then were not able to go get financing for to get that project done. And so that's just a risk question to the folks with equity and capital on whether or not they want to back a project like that. And that's sort of the thing that we keep hearing with Merrimack. Cost of capital went up. Their pro forma has a bigger gap in it that they anticipated. Also true, you know, with other projects that we hear about. And that's sort of where it's at, is just the cost of money continues to go up. And it's just hard to finance these projects. That seems to be the thing, the most common sort of refrain that we hear from the development community. Getting through our process as far as the entitlement is not the challenge. It's once they get the project entitled, then going and getting the development partners who will back it and give them the money to build and get an appropriate return on investment in a time frame that's acceptable to them.
Okay, appreciate that information, and I hope that we can get to the more substantive changes to Chapter 16, the 4.2 law. Thank you.
Counselor Hand?
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I really appreciate the presentation and an update on where we stand with housing and the different stages of where we are with actually completing housing. That seems to be the number one topic that, you know, whenever I'm around town and people stop me to ask a question, it's about housing. So it's on everybody's mind. I have some people who are very adamant about, you know, the needs that we have in this community and some of the things that, you know, there are a lot of people that are suffering, you know, regarding housing. They're desperate for housing. And so I was just wondering, do you have an update, you know, like an updated flyer that you're distributing to people so that they have some idea what's going on? Because, you know, I basically talked to them about all these projects that are in the works, and they don't seem to know much about it. They're very surprised to hear there are all these projects that are in one stage or another. But, you know, they just haven't noticed any progress. So, you know, some of these people, they have come in from other communities and they're, you know, a spouse has a new job or both of them have a new job at the lab. And, you know, and they're looking for any place to live and they're just having a horrible time. You know, they're living in you know, the ADUs and people's basements, et cetera. And, you know, as long as that's available, and sometimes that's just temporary. So, anyway, I really appreciate, you know, whatever we are doing to help move things forward. And the other question I have is, regarding the, property values of properties that actually create an ADU on their property. So my understanding is that, especially like if, you know, a lot of the houses, the older houses here in Los Alamos County, they were built with mother-in-law quarters in them, which many have rented out to students over the years. And, you know, my understanding, you know, even when I was looking for, you know, a house probably 15 years ago, you know, the real estate, you know, the realtors, I guess I should say, that basically, you know, I was told that a lot of people will dismantle like the downstairs kitchens and stuff like that because they don't want their house to be considered a multi-family unit because it devalues the property. And I was just wondering if you know anything about that.
Madam Chair, Counselor Hand, I have not heard that specific issue come up. We know that there are some issues where folks, you know, if you build an ADU, you become a landlord. And there are just some other challenges that might just be part of an education process with folks about, you know, encouraging more folks to want to either invite somebody into their house in a mother-in-law apartment and or to build, you know, some sort of an additional structure on their property. Because both of those things increase, you know, you've increased the value of your property. That has tax implications. It also has implications on who can use it and, you know, how you have to manage that and who's in there. And then once you have a tenant in that unit, then you have tenant law that you have to then follow if it's perhaps not a good match between the homeowner and the now tenant. So there are a lot of sort of, you know, complicating issues that might just be an education piece as we continue to have or start having these conversations around ADU in the community. And there are tenant resources as well as landlord resources in the state where you can get representation and even just, you know, like dial a lawyer kind of things. Hey, I'm having this issue with my tenant, or hey, I'm having this issue with my landlord. So there are resources that are out there for those kinds of things. We do have the tenant on our housing resource page for resources for renters page. So we do have some of that information on there, but I understand that it is often buried. And, you know, when you're in the moment, that's the last thing you want to do is go look through the housing page in Los Alamos to try to find that. But we hear you, and those are education things that we can work on.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on housing? Just so you know, this is only one part of the economic vitality presentation. Not that I'm discouraging any questions. All right, moving along. Thank you, Mr. Osborne.